What if I told you that the most powerful part of your twin flame journey isn't happening during the arguments? Not during the separation. Not even during the magical reunion signs you keep seeing. What if it's happening in the most private place imaginable, the bedroom? And no, not in the way you think. When most people hear the words bedroom secrets, their mind immediately goes to chemistry, passion, attraction, maybe even fantasy. But if you are truly on a twin flame journey, you already know something strange. What happens between you is never just physical. It's not just desire. It's not just connection. It's not just love. It's something that feels ancient, destabilizing, intoxicating, and sometimes terrifying. Have you ever noticed how, with anyone else, intimacy might feel pleasant, but with your twin flame, it feels like stepping into a mirror that can see through your skin? Have you ever experienced a moment where everything was calm, and suddenly your heart started racing for no clear reason? Or a moment where you felt completely open, exposed, emotionally naked, even though nothing dramatic was happening? Why does closeness with them sometimes feel overwhelming instead of safe? Why does one touch feel like it's unlocking memories you didn't even know you had? Why does silence feel louder than words? Tonight, we're going to talk about something almost no one in the twin flame community discusses honestly. Not because it's inappropriate, not because it's taboo, but because it's deeply misunderstood. The bedroom in a twin flame dynamic is not just a place of pleasure. It is a spiritual laboratory. It is a trauma activator. It is an energetic amplifier. It is where masks dissolve, and most people are not prepared for that. We're about to explore 5 hidden twin flame bedroom secrets they never told you. And I promise you, these are not tips. These are not techniques. These are not about performance. These are about awakening. Some of what you're about to hear may feel uncomfortable. You might recognize patterns you've tried to ignore. You might realize that what you thought was rejection was actually reflection. Because here's the truth no one warns you about. When you enter intimacy with your twin flame, you're not just meeting their body. You are meeting their inner child, their wounds, their fears, their unmet needs, their suppressed desires. And at the same time, they are meeting yours. That's why this connection feels different. That's why casual advice never seems to apply. That's why the same closeness that feels euphoric one night can feel destabilizing the next. It's not inconsistency. It's intensity. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever walked away from a moment of intimacy with your twin flame feeling confused instead of satisfied? Have you ever felt a sudden emotional shift, like one of you pulled away energetically even if physically you were still close? Have you ever noticed how small gestures, like the way they breathe, the way they look at you, the way they go silent, can trigger a wave of emotion that feels disproportionate? If you've experienced that, you're not crazy. You're not broken. And you're definitely not alone. Most people think intimacy is about bonding. But in a twin flame connection, intimacy is about exposure. Exposure to truth. Exposure to shadow. Exposure to the parts of yourself you carefully keep hidden from the world. And here's the part that might shock you. The bedroom is often where the runner-chaser dynamic becomes the most visible. Because physical closeness strips away intellectual defenses. You can argue all day with your twin flame and stay protected behind logic. But in the bedroom, there is no logic. There is only nervous system. There is only energy. There is only vulnerability. And vulnerability is where the ego panics. This is why so many twin flame pairs experience confusing patterns around intimacy. Moments of overwhelming closeness followed by emotional distance. Deep connection followed by silence. Intense attraction followed by sudden coldness. And instead of asking, "What is this showing me about my healing?" most people ask, "What's wrong with us?" Nothing is wrong, but something is being revealed. And revelation is rarely comfortable. The truth is, the bedroom in a twin flame journey functions like a magnifying glass. If there is fear of abandonment, it will surface there. If there is fear of engulfment, it will surface there. If there is shame around desire, it will surface there. If there is an unhealed inner child longing to be chosen, it will surface there. That's why this space feels so charged. It's not about technique. It's about truth. And most spiritual discussions romanticize twin flame intimacy. They talk about magnetic attraction, telepathic chemistry, divine union. And yes, that exists. But what they don't tell you is this. Before divine union comes emotional nakedness. Before sacred connection comes shadow exposure. Before harmony comes nervous system chaos. So if you've ever thought, why does this feel so intense? Why does being close to them sometimes make me want to run? Why do I feel both safe and unsafe at the same time? This video is for you. We're going deeper than surface level attraction. We're uncovering the psychological, energetic, and spiritual layers hidden inside what most people casually call chemistry, because chemistry isn't random. In a twin flame connection, chemistry is activation, and activation is the beginning of awakening. As we move through these 5 hidden secrets, I want you to do something important. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge your twin flame. Instead, observe. Notice which patterns resonate. Notice which memories come up. Notice where your body reacts, because that reaction is information, and information is power. By the end of this video, you may start seeing your past experiences in a completely different light. Moments you labeled as rejection might reveal themselves as fear. Moments you interpreted as distance might reveal themselves as protection. Moments you thought were failures might actually have been invitations to grow. So before we dive into secret number 1, take a breath. Ask yourself quietly, what if the bedroom was never the problem? What if it was the mirror? And what if everything that felt confusing was actually showing you exactly where your soul is asking to heal? Let's begin. Before we go any further, we need to redefine something, because if we don't shift the frame right now, everything that follows will be misunderstood. When we say bedroom in the context of a twin flame connection, we are not simply talking about a physical location with 4 walls and a locked door. We are talking about a field, an energetic chamber, a subconscious meeting ground, a sacred space where masks fall away, willingly or unwillingly. The bedroom is not just where bodies meet. It is where nervous systems collide. It is where attachment styles are activated. It is where the illusion of control dissolves. And that is why it feels so powerful. Most relationships operate on surface-level intimacy. There is attraction, affection, physical closeness, maybe even love. But much of it is filtered through personality, the version of ourselves we choose to show. We flirt. We charm. We perform. We adapt. But a twin flame dynamic doesn't allow performance for very long. Sooner or later, the bedroom becomes the place where the performance cracks. Have you ever noticed how you can hold it together all day, and then the moment you are alone together, something shifts? Why is it that vulnerability intensifies in that space? Why does silence feel heavier there? Why does your heart beat louder there? Because the bedroom in a twin flame journey functions as an amplifier. Whatever is unhealed gets louder. Whatever is suppressed rises. Whatever is hidden demands to be seen. This is why we must stop reducing twin flame intimacy to physical chemistry. Yes, the chemistry can be magnetic. Yes, the attraction can feel cosmic. Yes, the pull can feel undeniable. But chemistry is only the surface layer. Underneath that layer lies energetic entanglement. And beneath energetic entanglement lies subconscious exposure. When you and your twin flame enter that private space, your bodies may be present, but so are your inner children. So are your past heartbreaks. So are your fears of abandonment. So are your fears of being consumed. You are not just meeting each other in the present moment. You are meeting each other's emotional history. And this is where things become complicated. Because the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. The body remembers rejection. The body remembers betrayal. The body remembers not being chosen. So when you step into closeness with someone who mirrors your soul, the nervous system does not say, "This is romantic." It says, "Is this safe?" And safety is the true currency of intimacy. In a twin flame dynamic, the bedroom becomes the testing ground for safety. Not just physical safety, emotional safety, energetic safety, spiritual safety. You might find yourself asking, why do I feel so deeply connected and yet so exposed? Why does being fully seen feel both beautiful and terrifying? Why does part of me want to melt into them and another part want to retreat? This duality is not dysfunction. It is activation. Because twin flames do not simply attract each other's strengths, they awaken each other's wounds. And nowhere does that awakening happen more quickly than in moments of closeness. Let's break this down further. In everyday life, you can maintain identity. You can be the strong one, the independent one, the emotionally stable one, the detached one, the logical one. But in the bedroom, those identities start dissolving. And when identity dissolves, ego panics. The ego survives through control, through predictability, through maintaining a narrative. But intimacy with a twin flame removes predictability. You cannot predict what emotion will surface. You cannot predict which memory will arise. You cannot predict how deeply you will feel. And this unpredictability is what makes the space sacred. Because sacred does not mean comfortable. Sacred means transformative. The bedroom becomes a portal where you move from persona to authenticity, from protection to exposure, from illusion to truth. And truth is rarely convenient. Think about it. How many times have you experienced a shift during intimacy that you couldn't explain? Maybe everything was flowing, and suddenly one of you became quiet. Maybe there was laughter, and then unexpected tears. Maybe desire was intense, and then it vanished without warning. If this were a normal relationship, you might label it incompatibility. But in a twin flame connection, it is often recalibration. Recalibration of energy, recalibration of boundaries, recalibration of emotional capacity. The bedroom becomes the place where you see, without filters, how much closeness you can actually tolerate. Because desire is easy, sustained vulnerability is not. And this is where we must be honest. Many people romanticize twin flame intimacy as purely divine, purely harmonious, purely ecstatic. But the divine does not bypass shadow. It illuminates it. And illumination can be blinding. So when we speak about bedroom secrets, we are not speaking about performance. We are speaking about revelation. Revelation of attachment patterns. Revelation of control issues. Revelation of emotional triggers. Revelation of where love still feels unsafe. The bedroom in a twin flame journey is not designed to validate your ego. It is designed to evolve your soul. And evolution requires confrontation. Confrontation with fear. Confrontation with shame. Confrontation with the parts of you that still equate closeness with loss. This is why some twin flames experience intense pull cycles around intimacy. One moment there is deep merging. The next moment there is emotional distance. It is not manipulation. It is nervous system overload. Because when two highly mirrored energies come together, the intensity can exceed what the psyche knows how to regulate. So what do most people do? They misinterpret it. They assume rejection. They assume incompatibility. They assume something is broken. But what if nothing is broken? What if the bedroom is simply showing you your threshold for intimacy? What if it is revealing how much love you can receive without shutting down? What if it is exposing where you still brace for impact? In a twin flame dynamic, intimacy is not just an act. It is a mirror that reflects not just how much you love, but how much you fear love. And this is the frame we must hold as we move forward. Because the secrets we are about to uncover are not scandalous. They are spiritual. They are psychological. They are deeply human. If you enter this conversation expecting techniques, you will miss the point. If you enter expecting validation of fantasy, you may feel challenged. But if you enter with curiosity, something powerful can happen. You may begin to reinterpret your past experiences. You may begin to see that moments of confusion were invitations. You may begin to realize that intensity was never punishment, it was awakening. So as we step into secret number 1, keep this truth in your awareness. The bedroom in a twin flame journey is not about performance. It is about presence. It is not about perfection. It is about exposure. It is not about proving love. It is about learning to feel safe inside it. And once you understand that frame, everything changes. Now, let's reveal the first hidden secret. Secret number 1. The bedroom is where unhealed trauma surfaces first. Now that we've reframed what the bedroom truly represents in a twin flame dynamic, we can finally uncover the first hidden secret. And this one might surprise you. The bedroom is often the first place unhealed trauma rises to the surface. Not because something is wrong, not because your connection is flawed, but because intimacy removes distractions. During the day, you can avoid yourself. You can scroll. You can work. You can text. You can argue about logistics. You can intellectualize your emotions. But when you are physically close, when the lights are low, when the outside world fades, there is nowhere left to hide. And what happens when there is nowhere to hide? The nervous system speaks. Have you ever noticed how your body reacts before your mind understands what's happening? Maybe your breathing changes. Maybe your muscles tense. Maybe your heart races unexpectedly. Maybe tears well up, and you don't even know why. That is not random. That is stored memory being activated. Because trauma doesn't only live in memory. It lives in the body. And intimacy is one of the strongest activators of stored emotional memory. Now here's where the twin flame dynamic intensifies everything. With anyone else, you might be able to stay partially guarded. You might feel attraction, even affection, but your deeper layers remain protected. With your twin flame, they feel like home. And paradoxically, they feel like exposure. And exposure triggers survival instincts. Let's break this down. Imagine someone who experienced emotional abandonment in childhood. Maybe a parent was physically present but emotionally unavailable. Maybe affection was inconsistent. Maybe love was conditional. That child grows up learning one thing: closeness is unpredictable. Fast forward to adulthood. They meet their twin flame, someone who mirrors their soul. The attraction is magnetic. The connection is intense. And when intimacy begins to deepen, something unexpected happens. Instead of feeling only pleasure, they feel fear. Why? Because the nervous system remembers. It remembers that closeness once meant pain. So even if the present moment is safe, the body reacts as if danger is possible. You might find yourself pulling away. You might suddenly feel overwhelmed. You might crave distance right after a moment of deep connection. And your conscious mind might say, "What is wrong with me?" But the truth is more compassionate. Nothing is wrong with you. Something is being healed. The bedroom becomes the stage where your inner child steps forward. And your inner child does not speak in logic. It speaks in sensation, speaks in emotion, speaks in impulses. This is why some twin flames experience sudden mood shifts during intimacy. Laughter turning into silence. Desire turning into detachment. Closeness turning into withdrawal. It's not manipulation. It's activation. Because your twin flame does not just awaken love. They awaken memory. And memory includes pain. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt an intense wave of emotion during intimacy that felt bigger than the moment itself? Have you ever felt like you were reacting to something invisible? Have you ever wanted closeness desperately, and then felt the urge to escape it at the same time? That internal contradiction is the signature of trauma activation. Desire says, "Come closer." Fear says, "Protect yourself." And the bedroom becomes the battlefield between those two forces. This is why twin flame intimacy can feel euphoric one night and destabilizing the next. Because healing is not linear. One moment you feel open, the next moment you feel exposed. And exposure can feel dangerous if you've never been fully safe in love before. Here's another layer most people don't talk about. Sometimes trauma doesn't show up as fear. Sometimes it shows up as numbness. You might feel disconnected. You might feel like you're watching yourself from outside your body. You might feel emotionally distant even while physically present. That dissociation is also a survival response. It's the body saying, "This feels too intense. I need to protect you." And intensity is inevitable in a twin flame connection. Because they mirror you so clearly that avoidance becomes impossible. They don't just touch your body. They touch your wounds. They don't just see your surface. They see your patterns. And when someone sees you that deeply, old defenses activate automatically. Here's the paradox. The deeper the connection, the louder the trauma can become. That doesn't mean the connection is toxic. It means it is transformative. But transformation requires awareness. If you don't recognize trauma activation, you may misinterpret it. You may assume your twin flame is rejecting you. You may assume you're incompatible. You may assume the chemistry faded, but what if it didn't fade? What if it simply reached a layer you weren't prepared to face? Consider this example. A twin flame couple shares a moment of profound closeness. There is eye contact. There is vulnerability. There is emotional exposure. And suddenly one partner goes quiet. They roll away. They need space. The other partner feels hurt, rejected, confused. But what if that withdrawal wasn't rejection? What if it was overwhelm? What if their nervous system reached capacity? This is the hidden secret. In twin flame dynamics, intimacy does not just connect you. It stretches your emotional tolerance. And when your tolerance is stretched beyond what you've healed, trauma surfaces. Now here's the empowering part. Trauma surfacing is not failure. It is opportunity, because what rises can be integrated, but only if you observe instead of react. Instead of asking, why are they pulling away? You might ask, what is being triggered here? Instead of assuming abandonment, you might explore, what part of me fears losing closeness? Instead of labeling intensity as instability, you might see it as revelation. The bedroom is not exposing your weakness. It is exposing your growth edge. And growth edges are uncomfortable by nature. Let's go even deeper. Sometimes both twin flames are triggered simultaneously. One partner's fear activates the other's. One person withdraws. The other pursues. The classic runner-chaser pattern intensifies in that private space. Because intimacy magnifies attachment styles. Anxious attachment may crave reassurance through closeness. Avoidant attachment may crave autonomy after closeness. And when those patterns collide, confusion arises. But confusion is not the enemy. Unconsciousness is. The moment you recognize that trauma activation is part of the journey, something shifts. You stop personalizing every emotional wave. You stop assuming love disappeared. You stop interpreting vulnerability as danger. And you start witnessing your reactions. Witnessing your partner's reactions. Witnessing the dance between fear and desire. And witnessing is the beginning of mastery. The bedroom in a twin flame journey is not simply about pleasure. It is about integration. Integration of shadow. Integration of memory. Integration of parts of you that learned love through pain. So if you have ever felt overwhelmed in moments that were supposed to feel perfect, if you have ever cried without knowing why, if you have ever pulled away from the very person you wanted most, you are not broken. You are awakening. Because love that reaches your trauma is not here to destroy you. It is here to liberate you. And once you understand this secret, you stop fearing the intensity. You begin to respect it. Now that we've uncovered how trauma surfaces first, the next secret goes even deeper. Because what happens when touch itself becomes energy? Let's move into secret number 2. Secret number 2, physical touch becomes an energy exchange. If secret number 1 revealed that intimacy activates unhealed trauma, secret number 2 reveals something even more subtle and often more mysterious. In a twin flame dynamic, physical touch is not just physical. It becomes energetic. And if you've experienced this, you know exactly what I mean, even if you've never had the words to describe it. With most people, touch feels sensory. Warmth, pressure, skin against skin, pleasure. But with your twin flame, sometimes a single touch feels like a current, a charge, a wave that moves through your entire body. Sometimes you feel their mood before they speak. Sometimes your breathing synchronizes without effort. Sometimes your heart races at the same rhythm. And sometimes you feel emotions that don't even seem to belong to you. Why does that happen? Because in this kind of connection, touch becomes transmission. It's no longer just contact. It's exchange. Let's slow this down and examine it carefully. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for safety and resonance. When someone touches you, your body doesn't just register sensation. It registers intention, energy, tension, and emotional state. With ordinary relationships, there is usually some energetic separation. Even in love, there are boundaries that keep identities distinct. But twin flames often experience something different. The boundary feels thin, porous, almost dissolving. And when boundaries thin, energy blends. Have you ever noticed this? You walk into a room feeling calm, and after being close to your twin flame for a few minutes, you suddenly feel restless or emotional. Or the opposite. You were anxious, and one quiet embrace calms your entire system. That is not imagination. That is co-regulation. But in a twin flame, dynamic co-regulation can feel amplified to the point of fusion. You're not just calming each other. You're mirroring each other. And mirroring means nothing stays hidden for long. If they are anxious, you may feel it in your chest. If you are afraid, they may become distant without knowing why. If one of you is holding suppressed emotion, touch can unlock it instantly. This is why twin flame intimacy can feel psychic. You don't need words. You don't need explanation. A hand on your back says everything. A shift in breathing communicates more than a conversation. Pause feels louder than speech, because the body speaks energy fluently, and energy doesn't lie. Here's where it gets even more profound. When you and your twin flame touch, you are not just exchanging affection. You are exchanging information. Information about wounds. Information about desires. Information about fear. Information about readiness. Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt too seen during intimacy? Not judged, not criticized, but exposed. As if they could feel your insecurity before you admitted it. As if they could sense your longing before you voiced. That feeling of being too seen is often the moment energy is mirrored back to you. And being seen that clearly can feel terrifying if you're not used to unconditional exposure. Because exposure removes control. And the ego thrives on control. This is why some twin flames pull away after intense energetic moments. It's not about lack of attraction. It's about energetic overwhelm. When energy blends deeply, the nervous system can interpret it as loss of self. And losing the sense of self, even temporarily, can trigger panic. So what do people do when panic rises? They create distance. But distance doesn't erase the energetic imprint. That's why even during separation phases, twin flames often report feeling each other's emotions, dreaming about each other, sensing each other's mood shifts, feeling sudden waves of sadness or joy that don't logically belong to their day. Because once energetic exchange has occurred deeply, it leaves a resonance. And resonance doesn't require proximity. Now let's bring this back to the bedroom context. In physical intimacy, energy exchange intensifies. Eye contact becomes transmission. Breathing becomes synchronization. Heartbeat becomes rhythm. And touch becomes language. This is why sometimes twin flame intimacy feels less like action and more like merging. You might lose track of time. You might feel outside your body. You might experience emotional release without understanding the source. And sometimes you might feel overwhelmed by the intensity of connection itself. Have you ever asked yourself, why does this feel spiritual, not just physical? Why does closeness feel like something sacred is happening? Why does it feel bigger than two bodies in a room? Because energy doesn't stop at the skin. And in a twin flame dynamic, the energetic field between you is active, alive, and responsive. Here's an example. Imagine one partner has been suppressing grief. They haven't cried in months. They've been strong. They've been composed. During intimacy, their twin flame places a hand gently on their chest. And suddenly tears rise. Not because of something said. Not because of something done. But because touch unlocked a layer of stored emotion. That is energetic exchange. Or consider the opposite. One partner feels insecure. Afraid of not being enough. They don't say it. They try to hide it. But during closeness, the other partner feels sudden hesitation. A subtle energetic withdrawal. And without words, they sense something is off. That sensing is not coincidence. It's attunement. Twin flames often operate in heightened attunement. And attunement amplifies everything. Desire feels stronger. Connection feels deeper. But triggers feel sharper too. Because if you can feel their love intensely, you can also feel their fear intensely. And this is why awareness matters. If you interpret energetic shifts as rejection, you will create unnecessary pain. But if you interpret them as information, you gain insight. Instead of thinking, they don't want me, you might ask, what energy just shifted? Instead of assuming disinterest, you might explore, what are we both feeling right now? Energy exchange invites curiosity over assumption. It invites presence over projection. It invites grounding instead of reaction. Now let's address something important. Energetic exchange is not mystical fantasy. It is rooted in nervous system science. Humans are wired for resonance. Mirror neurons allow us to feel what others feel. Co-regulation allows us to stabilize through connection. Attachment patterns influence how we respond to closeness. But in a twin flame dynamic, these processes feel magnified because the emotional mirroring is so precise. You don't just resonate, you reflect. And reflection means clarity. Clarity can be beautiful, and clarity can be uncomfortable, because if you are holding fear, they feel it. If they are holding doubt, you sense it. And that level of transparency can feel overwhelming if you're used to hiding parts of yourself. But here's the deeper truth. Energetic exchange is not meant to destabilize you. It is meant to align you. When you become conscious of this exchange, you stop reacting unconsciously. You begin to ground yourself. You begin to take responsibility for your own emotional state before entering intimacy. You begin to ask, what energy am I bringing into this space? Am I anxious? Am I open? Am I seeking validation? Am I grounded? Because energy meets energy. And when both partners are conscious, intimacy becomes less about activation and more about alignment. Touch becomes healing instead of triggering. Breathing becomes calming instead of overwhelming. Silence becomes safe instead of tense. But that requires awareness. Without awareness, energetic exchange can feel chaotic. With awareness, it becomes sacred. So if you have ever felt currents during touch, if you have ever sensed their emotion before they spoke, if you have ever experienced emotional waves during closeness that felt bigger than logic, you are not imagining it. You are experiencing attunement at a high level. And attunement is one of the hallmarks of twin flame intimacy. But here's the next layer. What happens when that energy suddenly shifts? What happens when desire fades right before a breakthrough? What happens when closeness disappears just as connection deepens? That leads us into secret number 3. And this one changes everything. Secret number 3: desire can disappear right before a major awakening. This next secret is the one that confuses people the most, because no one talks about it honestly. In a twin flame connection, there are moments when desire doesn't increase. It vanishes. And when it vanishes, panic usually follows. You start asking yourself, did the attraction fade? Are we losing the spark? Are they pulling away? Is this the beginning of the end? But what if it's not the end? What if it's the beginning of something deeper? Here is the hidden truth. In twin flame dynamics, desire can temporarily disappear right before a major energetic or emotional awakening. And if you don't understand this pattern, you will misinterpret transformation as rejection. Let's explore why this happens. When intimacy intensifies, the nervous system can reach a threshold. First, the connection feels magnetic. Passion is strong. Chemistry feels effortless. Everything flows. But beneath that intensity, something else is happening. Layers are dissolving. Masks are thinning. Emotional defenses are weakening. And when defenses weaken, deeper truths prepare to surface. Sometimes the psyche needs space before it can integrate what is being revealed. That space often shows up as reduced desire. It's not about lack of attraction. It's about recalibration. Think of it like this. If you've ever worked out intensely, your muscles need rest to rebuild stronger. Without rest, they strain. Without pause, they burn out. The same applies to emotional and energetic intensity. Twin flame intimacy stretches your capacity to receive love. And when your capacity is stretched beyond what you've healed, the system slows down. Desire dips. Libido softens. Distance appears. And the ego panics. Because the ego equates desire with security. If they want me, I'm safe. If I want them, everything is okay. But twin flame journeys are not built on ego reassurance. They are built on soul evolution. And evolution requires integration. Let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced a moment where intimacy was strong, almost overwhelming, and then suddenly one or both of you felt distant? Not angry, not disconnected emotionally, just quiet, neutral, even indifferent. That neutral space is often misunderstood. But neutrality is not absence of love. It is nervous system stabilization. After intense energetic merging, the psyche needs to reset. The body needs to ground. The heart needs to process. And during that processing, desire may temporarily retreat. This is especially true right before a breakthrough, right before a conversation. That changes everything. Right before an emotional confession, right before a deep healing moment. Because sometimes passion is replaced by introspection. And introspection feels less exciting than desire, but it is more transformative. Here's a powerful example. Imagine two twin flames who have experienced intense physical and emotional closeness. They've shared vulnerability. They've felt the magnetic pull. But beneath that connection lies unspoken fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of engulfment. Fear of being fully known. As intimacy deepens, those fears intensify. And instead of exploding into conflict, something else happens. Desire softens. Touch becomes less urgent. The energy becomes still. On the surface, it looks like fading attraction. But internally, both nervous systems are processing. The soul is preparing to reveal something deeper than passion. And here's the paradox. When desire disappears, people often chase it. They try to recreate the spark. They try to force chemistry. They try to prove connection. But forcing desire interrupts awakening. Because sometimes the dip is intentional. Not consciously intentional. Energetically intentional. It is the pause before integration. Now let's talk about the runner-chaser dynamic here. Often when desire dips, the chaser panics. They interpret the shift as abandonment. They lean in harder, seek reassurance, try to reignite intensity. Meanwhile, the runner feels overwhelmed, not by lack of attraction, but by the pressure. Because the dip was meant to create reflection, not pursuit. And pursuit disrupts reflection. This is where awareness changes everything. If you understand that desire can ebb before expansion, you stop reacting impulsively. You stop assuming loss. You start observing patterns. You begin asking, what is trying to integrate here? What part of me feels unsafe when desire shifts? What am I attaching my worth to? Because often we attach identity to being desired. We attach value to being wanted. So when desire softens, it triggers insecurity. But twin flame journeys are not about validation through desire. They are about self-worth independent of it. Sometimes, when desire fades temporarily, it forces both partners to confront deeper emotional layers. Without the distraction of passion, conversations arise, truth surfaces, boundaries are clarified, fears are named. And once those layers are addressed, desire returns, but cleaner. More grounded, less frantic, more embodied. Let's go even deeper. There are moments in twin flame connections where physical desire is replaced by energetic stillness. Instead of urgency, there is presence. Instead of intensity, there is calm. First, this calm can feel confusing. Doesn't feel like fireworks. Feels like quiet. But quiet can be more intimate than passion. Because quiet requires trust. When desire fades, temporarily, it sometimes signals a shift from ego-driven attraction to soul-level connection. From chemistry based on novelty to connection based on awareness. From urgency to stability. But stability feels unfamiliar if you equate love with intensity. So the ego says, something is missing. The soul says, something is maturing. That is the hidden secret. Desire disappearing is not always regression. Sometimes it is evolution. Sometimes it is the space needed for deeper integration. Now let's address something important. Not every loss of desire is spiritual. Not every shift is awakening. But in a twin flame dynamic, especially when the connection remains emotionally charged beneath the surface, dips often precede breakthroughs. Have you noticed that? Right before major growth, there is often confusion. Right before clarity, there is uncertainty. Right before commitment, there is hesitation. This pattern repeats in intimacy too. The nervous system pulls back before it expands. The heart pauses before it opens further. And if you allow the pause without panic, expansion follows naturally. But if you react to the pause with fear, you create resistance. So here's the invitation. The next time desire shifts, instead of reacting, observe. Instead of chasing intensity, cultivate grounding. Instead of assuming rejection, explore reflection. Ask yourself, is this a loss, or is this integration? Is this distance, or is this recalibration? Am I equating passion with love? Because love can exist even when desire is quiet. And sometimes, quiet desire is preparing for deeper awakening. In twin flame journeys, nothing is static. Energy moves. Intensity rises and falls. But beneath those waves, something consistent remains. The bond, the resonance, the mirror. If the bond is intact but desire softens, it may not be fading. It may be transforming. And transformation often feels like emptiness before it feels like expansion. So if you have ever experienced a sudden dip in desire with your twin flame, if you have ever panicked at the silence that followed intensity, if you have ever wondered whether something was wrong, consider this possibility. The pause may be sacred, the stillness may be necessary, and the disappearance of desire may be the doorway to something deeper than passion. Now let's explore the next hidden truth. Because sometimes silence itself becomes the most intimate experience of all. Secret number 4: silence in the bedroom can be more intimate than passion. Now we arrive at a secret that almost no one talks about because it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't look cinematic. It doesn't look like the kind of thing people write poems about. But in a twin flame connection, silence in the bedroom can be more intimate than passion. Let that sink in. More intimate than intensity. More intimate than desire. More intimate than fireworks. Because silence removes performance. And without performance, only truth remains. Most people associate intimacy with action, movement, expression, heat. But twin flame intimacy often reaches a stage where something unexpected happens. The urgency softens. The words fade. The room becomes still. And you are simply there. Together. Breathing. Aware. And that stillness can feel heavier than any physical closeness. Have you ever experienced this? Lying next to your twin flame without touching. No dramatic conversation. No grand declarations. Just presence. And somehow that presence feels overwhelming. Why? Because silence eliminates distraction. In silence, you can't hide behind flirtation. You can't hide behind jokes. You can't hide behind physical chemistry. All that remains is energy. And energy in its purest form is revealing. When two people share silence comfortably, it signals safety. But when two twin flames share silence, it can feel like standing in a mirror that reflects your soul. Because in stillness, the subconscious becomes louder. You start noticing subtle shifts. Their breathing pattern. The way their body relaxes or doesn't. The way your own heart rate responds. And sometimes that awareness feels almost too intimate. Because being seen in silence means there is nothing to prove. And nothing to distract from. What is real? Here's the deeper layer. Passion can be exhilarating. But passion can also be a form of escape. Movement distracts from vulnerability. Intensity distracts from insecurity. Desire distracts from fear. Silence removes all of that. Silence says, there is nothing happening right now except us. And that can feel terrifying if you're not used to being fully present. Let me ask you something. Why does silence sometimes feel awkward in relationships? Because silence exposes emotional distance. If two people are disconnected, silence becomes uncomfortable. But in a twin flame dynamic, silence often feels intense, not because of distance but because of depth. The depth of attunement. The depth of mirroring. The depth of emotional exposure. Have you ever laid next to your twin flame and felt like they could sense everything you were thinking, even without speaking? Have you ever felt waves of emotion rise during quiet moments? Have you ever felt more vulnerable in stillness than in action? That's because silence amplifies awareness. And awareness is intimacy in its purest form. Now here's where things become even more profound. In twin flame journeys, silence often marks a transition. A shift from reactive connection to conscious presence. At first, the relationship may be filled with intensity, dramatic highs and lows, emotional conversations, magnetic attraction, push and pull dynamics. But as healing progresses, something changes. The connection begins to stabilize. The chaos softens. And silence becomes safe. Safe enough to sit in. Safe enough to breathe in. Safe enough to exist without constant stimulation. That is a sign of growth. Because real intimacy is not sustained by intensity. It is sustained by presence. Let's explore a scenario. Two twin flames are lying together after an emotional conversation. In the past, this would have led to either escalation or passionate distraction. But this time neither happens. They simply lie there. No one rushes to fill the space. No one tries to force energy. They allow the stillness. And in that stillness, something subtle occurs. Their nervous systems regulate. Their breathing synchronizes. Their bodies relax. And for the first time, silence doesn't feel like tension. Feels like trust. Trust that the connection doesn't need to be constantly validated. Trust that love doesn't require performance. Trust that being is enough. But here's the challenge. Many people misinterpret silence as fading chemistry. They equate intensity with passion and quiet with boredom. So when the energy softens, they panic. They try to reignite drama. They mistake calm for loss. But in twin flame connections, calm is often maturity. It signals that the nervous system no longer needs chaos to feel alive. It signals that love is becoming embodied rather than explosive. Now, this doesn't mean silence is always easy. Sometimes silence can bring suppressed emotion to the surface. Without distraction, unresolved feelings rise. You may suddenly feel sadness, or fear, or vulnerability, but that vulnerability is sacred, because in silence you meet yourself. And your twin flame becomes the witness to that meeting. Witnessing is one of the highest forms of intimacy. Not fixing, not rescuing, not entertaining, just witnessing. Being present while the other person exists authentically. Have you ever felt a moment where nothing was happening externally, but internally everything felt profound? That is the essence of this secret. Twin flame intimacy evolves from intensity to stillness, from urgency to grounded presence, from performance to authenticity, and silence becomes the container for that evolution. There's also a neurological explanation here. When two people feel safe together, their parasympathetic nervous systems activate. Heart rate slow. Breathing deepens. Muscles relax. This is the biological foundation of calm intimacy. But because twin flame dynamics are often intense in the beginning, calm can feel unfamiliar. If you equate love with adrenaline, calm feels empty. But if you equate love with safety, calm feels sacred. So ask yourself honestly, when silence arises between you and your twin flame, what do you feel? Do you feel peace? Or do you feel anxiety? If anxiety arises, it may reveal your attachment to intensity. If peace arises, it may reveal integration. Neither response is wrong. Both are informative. Because the bedroom, as we've established, is a mirror. And silence is one of its clearest reflections. It reflects how comfortable you are being fully present. Without performance. Without distraction. Without proving anything. It reflects whether you can exist in love without needing constant stimulation. And that is profound, because mature love is not loud. It is steady. It does not demand fireworks. It creates foundation. So if you have ever experienced a moment where silence felt heavier than passion, if you have ever felt deeply connected without words, if you have ever realized that simply lying next to them felt more intimate than any dramatic gesture, you are witnessing the shift from reactive love to conscious union. And conscious union is quieter, but deeper. And here's the truth most people don't expect. When silence becomes safe, the runner-chaser dynamic begins to dissolve. Because neither person is trying to escape or pursue. They are simply present. And presence is the antidote to chaos. Now that we've uncovered how silence can be the most intimate space of all, we are ready to explore the final hidden secret. Because even in stillness, one subtle pattern can reveal everything about who is running and who is chasing. Let's move into secret number 5. Secret number 5: the bedroom reveals who is chasing and who is running. Now we arrive at one of the most confronting secrets of all. Because this one doesn't just expose trauma. It doesn't just reveal energy exchange. It doesn't just soften into silence. It exposes power. And in a twin flame dynamic, power is rarely balanced in the beginning. The bedroom is often where the runner-chaser dynamic becomes the most visible. Not in arguments, not during separation, not in text messages, but in moments of intimacy. Why? Because intimacy strips away strategy. You can carefully craft messages during the day. You can analyze words. You can maintain composure. But in the bedroom, the nervous system takes over. And the nervous system does not lie. Let's break this down carefully. The chaser in a twin flame connection is not just someone who pursues physically. It's the partner whose nervous system equates closeness with safety. They feel regulated through connection. They feel secure through intimacy. They lean in when uncertainty appears. The runner is not just someone who withdraws physically. It's the partner whose nervous system equates autonomy with safety. They feel regulated through space. They feel secure through independence. They lean back when intensity rises. Now here's the key. The bedroom magnifies these tendencies. Have you ever noticed how one partner may seek closeness more actively, initiate touch more often, desire reassurance through physical intimacy, while the other partner subtly hesitates, delays, withdraws just enough to create confusion? This is not about attraction. This is about regulation. For the chaser, intimacy feels like relief. For the runner, intimacy can feel like pressure. And pressure activates survival instincts. Imagine this scenario. Two twin flames are deeply attracted to each other. The connection is undeniable. But during intimacy, one partner feels a subtle shift. Their chest tightens. Their breathing becomes shallow. They suddenly feel overwhelmed, not because they don't care, but because closeness is triggering loss of control. So they create space. They pull away, maybe physically, maybe emotionally. The other partner immediately feels it. The energy changes. The room feels different, and anxiety rises. Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? The chaser responds by leaning in, harder, trying to reestablish closeness, seeking reassurance. And without realizing it, both partners enter a nervous system dance. The more one pursues, the more the other retreats. The more one retreats, the more the other pursues. And this pattern becomes especially visible in moments of vulnerability, because vulnerability threatens control. Let's ask a deeper question. Why does vulnerability threaten the runner? Because vulnerability feels like dependency, and dependency feels dangerous if independence was once the only way to survive. Why does distance threaten the chaser? Because distance feels like abandonment, and abandonment feels dangerous if connection was once inconsistent. The bedroom becomes the stage where these subconscious scripts replay. But here's the empowering part. It also becomes the stage where they can be rewritten. First, we must acknowledge something uncomfortable. The runner-chaser dynamic is not about who loves more. It's about who fears more. And fear surfaces strongest in intimacy. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the runner initiates desire intensely, but once closeness deepens, they subtly disengage? That's because desire feels powerful. Desire feels controlled. But emotional merging feels uncontrollable. So when the merging begins, they regulate by stepping back. Meanwhile, the chaser may hesitate initially, but once they feel closeness, they attach more deeply. Because closeness confirms safety, so they reach for more of it. Neither is wrong. Both are responding to old wiring. But when unconscious, this wiring creates confusion. Because on the surface, it looks like inconsistency. Hot and cold, pull and push, passion and distance. But beneath the surface, it is simply nervous systems negotiating safety. The bedroom reveals this negotiation clearly. Watch the subtle cues. Who initiates more often? Who pulls back first? Who seeks reassurance afterward? Who avoids eye contact when things get too intimate? These patterns tell a story, not about love, about fear. And here's where this becomes transformative. When both partners become aware of this dynamic, the power struggle softens. The chaser realizes, my worth is not dependent on being desired in this moment. The runner realizes, closeness does not mean losing myself. And slowly, the dance changes. Instead of pursuit and withdrawal, there is communication. Instead of reaction, there is regulation. Instead of assumption, there is curiosity. Let's explore an example of conscious awareness. During intimacy, the runner feels overwhelmed. In the past, they would have silently withdrawn. This time, they pause and say, "I'm feeling a little flooded. I need a moment." The chaser, instead of panicking, responds, "Thank you for telling me." No dramatic escalation. No chasing. No retreating into silence. Just awareness. That moment shifts everything. Because the dynamic moves from unconscious reaction to conscious partnership. But awareness takes courage. It requires both partners to admit vulnerability. It requires the chaser to release control. It requires the runner to tolerate closeness. And tolerating closeness is often the hardest task of all. Now let's address something critical. The runner-chaser dynamic is not fixed. Roles can reverse. Sometimes the runner becomes the pursuer. Sometimes the chaser withdraws, especially as healing progresses. Because once you integrate fear in one area, another layer emerges, and the bedroom continues to reveal it. That's why it's such a powerful mirror. It doesn't just show attraction. It shows emotional capacity. It shows where you still brace for impact. It shows where you equate love with loss. And here's the final truth about this secret. The bedroom does not create the runner-chaser dynamic. It exposes it. The dynamic already exists beneath the surface. Intimacy simply illuminates it. And illumination gives you choice. Choice to keep reacting, or choice to evolve. Ask yourself honestly, when closeness deepens, what is my instinct? To lean in, or to pull away? When they create space, what is my instinct? To chase, or to self-regulate? These answers reveal your pattern. And patterns are not destiny. They are invitations. Invitations to build secure attachment. Invitations to develop emotional tolerance. Invitations to transform reactive love into conscious union. Because true twin flame union is not about eliminating intensity. It is about mastering it. It is not about removing fear. It is about navigating fear together. And that navigation begins with awareness. The moment you see the runner-chaser dynamic in real time, you step out of it. You become the observer rather than the participant. And from observation comes transformation. So if you have ever felt confused by the push-pull dynamic in the bedroom, if you have ever felt like intimacy triggered pursuit or retreat, if you have ever wondered why love feels like a dance between closeness and distance, now you know. It is not chaos. It is conditioning being revealed. And once revealed, it can be healed. Now that we've uncovered all 5 hidden bedroom secrets, the deeper question becomes this. Why are these truths rarely talked about? And what does it mean for your twin flame journey moving forward? Let's integrate everything we've discovered. Now that we've uncovered all 5 hidden bedroom secrets, there's a deeper question we need to ask. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Why do most twin flame conversations focus on signs, synchronicities, reunion timelines, telepathy, dreams, but almost never on what actually happens in private moments of vulnerability? Why is the narrative always romanticized, but rarely humanized? The answer is uncomfortable, because the truth is less glamorous than the fantasy, and fantasy sells better than emotional responsibility. Let's be honest. The twin flame concept is often presented as destiny-driven, divinely orchestrated, magically aligned. And yes, there can be divine elements. There can be synchronicity. There can be cosmic resonance. But what most people are not prepared for is this. Twin flame intimacy is not just mystical. It is psychological. It is nervous system based. It is shadow activating. And shadow is not pretty. Shadow reveals insecurity, attachment wounds, fear of rejection, fear of engulfment, shame around desire, power struggles, emotional immaturity, and none of that fits into the fantasy narrative of perfect soul union. So instead of talking about it, people avoid it. They interpret intensity as chemistry. They interpret distance as fate. They interpret desire shifts as destiny. But rarely do they examine the underlying psychological mechanics. Why? Because examining it requires accountability. And accountability disrupts fantasy. Let's explore this carefully. Fantasy says, if they are my twin flame, everything should feel natural. Reality says, if they are your twin flame, everything will feel magnified. Fantasy says, if the connection is divine, it should be effortless. Reality says, if the connection is divine, it will demand growth. Fantasy says, if intimacy is spiritual, it should always feel blissful. Reality says, if intimacy is spiritual, it will illuminate wounds. The reason these bedroom secrets are rarely discussed is because they challenge the illusion of perfection. They require both partners to acknowledge that love alone does not equal readiness, that attraction does not equal regulation, that chemistry does not equal emotional maturity. And here's another layer. Society in general does not teach emotional literacy. We are taught how to pursue, how to attract, how to perform, but we are not taught how to regulate our nervous systems. We are not taught how to tolerate vulnerability. We are not taught how to stay present during discomfort. So when twin flame intimacy activates trauma, most people interpret it as dysfunction rather than invitation. Instead of asking, what is being revealed here? They ask, what's wrong with us? And that question immediately shifts focus from healing to blame. Blame keeps you stuck. Awareness moves you forward. Another reason these secrets are rarely talked about is because intimacy feels private, sacred, personal. Many people feel ashamed to admit that vulnerability triggers them, ashamed to admit that they pull away, ashamed to admit that desire fluctuates, ashamed to admit that silence feels overwhelming, so they hide it. They keep the narrative polished. They present the connection publicly as magical, while privately navigating confusion. But secrecy creates isolation, and isolation reinforces misunderstanding. Let's also acknowledge something deeper. The twin flame narrative is often monetized. It is packaged as reunion-focused, timeline-focused, sign-focused. But nervous system healing is not as marketable as reunion predictions. Shadow integration is not as exciting as destiny affirmations. Emotional maturity is not as dramatic as karmic prophecy. So the conversation stays surface level, and people keep searching for answers in external signs rather than internal awareness. But here's the truth. The bedroom secrets we discussed are not scandals. They are spiritual psychology. They are attachment theory in action. They are nervous systems negotiating closeness. And when you understand that, you stop romanticizing suffering. You stop interpreting every emotional wave as fate. You begin seeing patterns clearly. Now let's go even deeper. There's also cultural conditioning around intimacy. We are taught that desire equals love, that passion equals compatibility, that silence equals boredom, that distance equals loss. But in twin flame dynamics, these equations don't always apply. Sometimes desire dips before growth. Sometimes silence signals safety. Sometimes distance reveals integration. And without awareness, these shifts feel threatening. So people don't talk about them. They fear they will invalidate the connection. They fear they will expose weakness. They fear they will challenge the narrative. But here's what actually happens when you talk about these truths. You normalize growth. You normalize fluctuation. You normalize nervous system activation. You remove shame from vulnerability. And when shame is removed, healing accelerates. Let me ask you something. How many times have you experienced something in your twin flame connection and thought, no one else talks about this? How many times have you felt confused in moments that were supposed to feel magical? How many times have you questioned yourself silently because the experience didn't match the fantasy? That silence is what keeps these secrets hidden. But silence also keeps you isolated. And isolation fuels self-doubt. Here's a critical shift. Twin flame journeys are not about perfection. They are about evolution. Evolution requires friction. Friction reveals shadow. Shadow demands integration. And integration requires honesty. Not fantasy. Not denial. Honesty. When we talk openly about trauma activation, energy exchange, desire recalibration, silence as intimacy, and the runner-chaser dynamic, we remove mystification. We bring the connection back into embodied reality. We stop floating in spiritual abstraction and ground ourselves in psychological awareness. And grounding is powerful, because grounded spirituality integrates body and soul. It doesn't bypass discomfort. It navigates it. So these secrets remain hidden not because they are scandalous. But because they demand maturity, they require both partners to look inward, to ask, what part of me is reacting? What part of me is afraid? What part of me needs reassurance? What part of me needs autonomy? These are not easy questions, but they are transformative ones. And once you ask them, something shifts. The connection becomes less chaotic, less mysterious, less fate-driven, and more conscious. You stop waiting for signs. You start observing patterns. You stop chasing intensity. You start cultivating stability. You stop blaming dynamics. You start regulating responses. And this is where twin flame journeys mature. From drama to depth, from fantasy to embodiment, from confusion to clarity. So if you've ever felt alone in your experience, if you've ever questioned why intimacy felt triggering, if you've ever wondered why desire fluctuated or silence felt heavy, now you know why it's rarely discussed. Because truth requires courage, and courage requires vulnerability. But here's the beautiful part. Once you understand these secrets, you can't unsee them. You become aware, and awareness transforms the entire journey. Now the final step is integration, because knowing the secrets is one thing, living them consciously is another. Let's bring everything together and close this in a way that empowers you moving forward. Now that we've uncovered the 5 hidden secrets, trauma activation, energetic exchange, desire recalibration, silence as intimacy, and the runner-chaser dynamic, the real question becomes this: what do you do with this awareness? Because awareness without integration changes nothing. You can understand every psychological layer, every energetic shift, every nervous system response, and still repeat the same patterns if you don't apply it consciously. So this part is about transformation. How do you turn what once felt confusing into something empowering? How do you transform the bedroom from a battlefield of triggers into a portal for healing? First, we must accept something foundational. Triggers are not interruptions of love. They are invitations to deepen it, but only if you stop reacting and start observing. Let's begin with a simple shift in perspective. Instead of asking, why are they doing this? What is this moment revealing in me? That single shift moves you from blame to awareness, from external control to internal regulation, from fear to curiosity. Imagine this scenario. You are in a moment of intimacy, and suddenly your partner withdraws emotionally. In the past, this would have triggered panic. You might have leaned in harder, asked for reassurance, interpreted it as rejection. Now with awareness, you pause. You feel the sensation in your body. Is your chest tightening? Is your breathing shallow? Is your mind racing? Instead of reacting outwardly, you regulate inwardly. Slow breath. Ground your feet. Relax your shoulders. And then you ask yourself, what am I afraid of right now? Usually the answer is simple. I'm afraid of being abandoned. That's not about your partner. That's about your history. And the moment you separate history from present reality, something shifts. You reclaim your power. Now let's explore this from the runner's perspective. You are in intimacy and suddenly you feel overwhelmed. Closeness feels intense. Your chest tightens. You want space. In the past, you might have withdrawn silently, created emotional distance, pulled back without explanation. Now with awareness, you pause. Instead of escaping, you name the sensation. I'm feeling flooded. Not you're too much. Not this is wrong. But I'm feeling overwhelmed. That subtle language shift changes the dynamic. Because now the experience is shared consciously rather than acted out unconsciously. This is integration. Integration is not about eliminating triggers. It's about navigating them skillfully. And skill begins with regulation. Let's talk about nervous system regulation for a moment. Twin flame intimacy activates both attachment and trauma circuits. If you don't know how to regulate your nervous system, you will default to instinct. Chase, withdraw, shut down, escalate. But regulation looks different. It looks like breathing before speaking. It looks like pausing before reacting. It looks like grounding your body when emotion rises. Here's a powerful exercise. The next time you feel activated during intimacy, do not immediately interpret the moment. Do not create a story. Instead, bring awareness to 3 things. 1. What is happening in my body? 2. What emotion is surfacing? 3. What memory or fear does this resemble? You will often discover that the intensity is not about the present moment. It is about a younger version of you seeking safety. And when you recognize that, compassion replaces panic. Compassion for yourself. Compassion for your twin flame. Because they are navigating their own internal activations at the same time. This is why the bedroom can become a healing chamber rather than a trigger chamber. When both partners commit to awareness, intimacy transforms. Instead of reacting to each other's defenses, you begin supporting each other's regulation. Instead of interpreting silence as rejection, you allow it as processing. Instead of interpreting desire dips as loss, you see them as recalibration. Instead of engaging in the runner-chaser dance, you pause the choreography. And pausing the choreography is powerful, because the dance only continues when both partners move automatically. When one person steps out of the pattern, the dynamic shifts. Let's go deeper. Healing does not require perfect behavior. It requires conscious repair. You will still get triggered. You will still misinterpret moments. You will still feel insecure at times. But integration means you come back to center faster. You repair faster. You communicate faster. You reflect instead of deflect. For example, instead of saying, "You always pull away," you might say, "When you pull away, I feel scared." Notice the difference. The first statement accuses. The second reveals vulnerability. And vulnerability invites connection. Blame invites defense. This is how the bedroom becomes a portal for emotional growth. Not because it's dramatic, but because it reveals your deepest patterns in real time. Now let's address something essential. Integration does not mean tolerating unhealthy behavior. It does not mean spiritualizing disrespect. It does not mean ignoring red flags. It means differentiating between trauma activation and true incompatibility. If both partners are willing to self-reflect, to regulate, to communicate, growth is possible. If one partner refuses awareness, the pattern persists. Awareness requires mutual participation. But your responsibility is your own regulation, your own reflection, your own growth. And when you grow, the dynamic must adjust. Because relationships operate as systems. Change one part of the system and the entire structure shifts. Here's the deeper spiritual layer. The twin flame journey is often described as a path toward union. But union is not just physical togetherness. It is internal coherence. When you regulate your nervous system, integrate your trauma, and cultivate secure attachment within yourself, you move toward inner union. An inner union changes outer dynamics. Because you stop seeking completion. You start embodying wholeness. Wholeness reduces chasing. Wholeness reduces running. Wholeness stabilizes intimacy. And stabilized intimacy feels different. Less frantic. Less dramatic. More grounded. More peaceful. Peace can feel unfamiliar at first. If you equate love with chaos, peace feels boring. But peace is sustainable. And sustainability is what long-term union requires. So here's the integration invitation. The next time something shifts in the bedroom, energy, desire, silence, distance, do not panic. Pause. Observe. Regulate. Reflect. Communicate. And ask yourself, what is this moment teaching me about my capacity for intimacy? Because intimacy is not about intensity. It is about tolerance for closeness without losing yourself. And tolerance for closeness grows through awareness. Each trigger is a doorway. Each activation is an opportunity. Each uncomfortable moment is a mirror. You can either fight the mirror or learn from it. When you choose learning, everything transforms. The bedroom stops being a place of confusion. It becomes a classroom, a sacred classroom where love exposes shadow not to shame you but to free you. And freedom is the ultimate goal. Not fantasy, not obsession, not drama. Freedom to love without fear dominating your nervous system. Freedom to receive closeness without bracing for loss. Freedom to exist in silence without anxiety. Freedom to experience desire without attachment to validation. That is integration. And integration is what transforms twin flame intensity into conscious union. Now let's bring this entire journey to a close with something even more powerful. A reminder of what all of this truly means for you and your path forward. After everything we've explored, the trauma activation, the energetic exchange, the disappearance of desire, the sacred silence, the runner-chaser dynamic, and the path of integration, there is one final truth I want to leave you with. The bedroom was never the problem. It was the mirror. It was never exposing weakness. It was revealing readiness. It was never sabotaging love. It was illuminating where love still felt unsafe. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. Intensity is not dysfunction. Activation is not incompatibility. Silence is not absence. Desire fluctuation is not loss. And vulnerability is not danger. What you have experienced in your twin flame journey, especially in the most private, intimate spaces, is not random. It is not punishment. It is not a sign that something is broken. It is a sign that something powerful is unfolding. But unfolding requires participation. It requires awareness. It requires maturity. And most importantly, it requires self-responsibility. Because here is the deeper shift that changes everything. Your twin flame is not here to complete you. They are here to confront you. Not to hurt you, but to reveal you. To reveal where you still fear abandonment. To reveal where you still fear losing yourself. To reveal where you attach your worth to being desired. To reveal where you equate love with intensity. And once revealed, you have a choice. You can react unconsciously, or you can evolve consciously. Let me ask you something honestly. When intimacy feels overwhelming, do you assume something is wrong? Or do you recognize that something deeper is surfacing? When desire shifts, do you panic? Or do you ask what is integrating? When silence fills the room, do you interpret it as distance? Or do you experience it as presence? Your answers determine the trajectory of your journey, because twin flame union is not about staying in constant intensity. It is about stabilizing love in your nervous system. It is about transforming fear into awareness. It is about shifting from reactive attachment to conscious intimacy. And that transformation starts within you, not in your partner's behavior, not in the timing of reunion, not in external signs. Within you. If this journey has taught you anything, it has likely taught you that you cannot control the other person. You cannot force readiness. You cannot accelerate healing for someone else. But you can regulate your own nervous system. You can heal your own attachment wounds. You can build emotional capacity. You can cultivate inner security. And when you do, something profound happens. The push-pull dynamic softens. The intensity becomes grounded. The silence becomes safe. The desire becomes embodied rather than frantic. And whether reunion happens physically or not, you become whole. That is the real destination, not obsession, not constant craving, not dramatic cycles. Wholeness. Because when you are whole, you stop chasing. And when you are whole, you stop running. You remain present, stable, self-aware. And love flows differently from that place. It is not desperate. It is not anxious. It is not avoidant. It is anchored. So if you have been confused by what happens in the bedroom, you have questioned yourself during moments of vulnerability, if you have interpreted activation as incompatibility, I want you to reframe your story. You were not failing. You were awakening. You were not losing connection. You were encountering your growth edge. You were not being rejected. You were being invited into deeper self-awareness. And that invitation is sacred, even when it feels uncomfortable, because growth rarely feels comfortable. But growth is necessary for conscious union. Now I want you to reflect for a moment. Think about one experience you had with your twin flame that felt confusing. Maybe it was a moment of sudden distance. Maybe it was a dip in desire. Maybe it was an intense silence. Now ask yourself, what was that moment teaching me? Not about them, about me. What fear was activated? What pattern was revealed? What part of me needed reassurance? And how would I respond differently now, with awareness? This is where transformation begins. Not by replaying the past, but by reinterpreting it. Because when you reinterpret your experiences through the lens of growth, you remove shame. You remove self-blame. You remove the illusion that love should always feel easy. And you step into maturity. Twin flame journeys are not fairy tales. They are accelerators. They accelerate healing. They accelerate awareness. They accelerate evolution. And sometimes acceleration feels chaotic before it feels clear. But clarity always follows awareness. So as you move forward, remember this. The bedroom was never about performance. It was about presence. It was never about proving love. It was about tolerating vulnerability. It was never about maintaining intensity. It was about building stability. And stability is far more powerful than fireworks. Now, if this video resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these patterns, if you felt validated, if something finally made sense, I invite you to go deeper. Comment below and share which secret impacted you the most. Was it trauma activation? Energetic exchange? Desire recalibration? Sacred silence? Or the runner-chaser revelation? Your experience might help someone else feel less alone. And if you're ready to approach your twin flame journey with more awareness, more regulation, and more grounded spirituality, make sure you subscribe, because we're going to continue exploring this path not through fantasy, but through conscious evolution. This journey is not about chasing union. It's about becoming it. And when you become union within yourself, everything shifts. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this awakening within me? That question changes everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your courage. And remember, love is not here to destabilize you. It is here to refine you. See you in the next video.